have seen many times a tirade against media organisations from the president there who publish critical stories about his administration. We can talk about it further and some of the things that came up in that by going to Deutsche Welle correspondent Arthur Sullivan, who joins us from Berlin. OK, so NATO's future is what they are there to talk about, and the role of President Trump at this meeting, whether he can shore things up, whether he can get the 5% spending. What do you think?
Hi, Lorna. Well, yeah, I'm not sure what you can say really after listening to all of that. There's just so much there to go through. As you said, this is a NATO meeting. It's the first NATO meeting since Trump returned to the White House. And there was obviously an early expectation ahead of this that they would be talking about that topic of defence spending. Then we've had what's happened in Iran and Israel over the last 10 days or so. And then that obviously took some of the narrative. And now there's a new narrative obviously emerging about Trump's commitment to NATO, specifically at this meeting, whether he's going to renege on previous US commitments and the existing commitment to Article 5, which is that an attack on one NATO member is an attack on all. So there's really so much that we could get into here. The thing is, for 10 years, Trump has been dominating the NATO narrative. Even when he wasn't president, when Biden was president, as the leader of NATO's most powerful member, the US, his views really count more than anything else. And I think we saw this really well illustrated yesterday when Mark Rutte, the Secretary General, these text messages that he sent to Trump were published and verified. In fact, NATO confirmed that they were actually from him, where he was praising Trump to the skies, quite a fawning tone, really, you would have to say, objectively speaking. And he even used some of Trump's language where he was saying, you know, Europe would have to pay big. He was praising Trump for his actions in Iran and so on. And so I think what we're probably going to see here today is, hopefully, from the perspective of NATO, some sort of an agreement on defence spending. But no matter what comes out, the narrative is going to return to Trump. He will take the credit if there is an agreement on defence spending. The big thing they're trying to achieve is that there will be member states will commit to spending at least 5%. That's 3.5% of their GDP on actual defence spending, 1.5% on infrastructure spending which is connected to defence, so like roads, bridges, cybersecurity. The hope is that there will be that agreement, but there are some potential opt-outs and some room for ambiguity on that.
Yeah, from what I've been reading, Arthur, Spain is apparently not too keen to raise their defence spending to 5%. It does look like most of the others are going to do so, and it has been something that Trump has campaigned for a long time. He's also suggested that the US might not need to be in NATO. Is that what they'll be talking about as well, to keep the US within the NATO umbrella?
Right, they're the two big strands. So just quickly on the Spain point, the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, who is one of Europe's few clearly left-wing prime ministers, he quickly came out against this 5% plan and said it would damage social spending in the country, it would damage their commitment to green and environmentally friendly spending, and it appears there is some sort of potential carve-out there. The problem there is, Lorna, that there's several other member states who currently don't meet the 2% of GDP threshold. There's around 10 in total. They may also see Spain getting a special deal and may say, well, we want some of that too. So there is the room there for a potential issue arising with this, because we know how sensitive Trump is on this question of European countries not spending enough in his view. So we're going to find out a bit more in a few hours. But yeah, the bigger question really is that thing about the commitment to Article 5. So for years, there's been uncertainty in NATO around US commitment because of Trump and the regular tirades he goes on against NATO. Now, on his flight over to The Hague, he spoke to reporters on the plane, separate obviously to that discussion we just heard a few minutes ago, where he drew serious doubt about the commitment. He said things like, well, there's different definitions of Article 5, and I'll tell you my definition when I get there. So there is a concern about that. Mark Rutte said yesterday that he believes the US is totally committed to the alliance, but I think it's already clear to many European leaders that ship has sailed. The US under Trump has shown itself to be an unpredictable, unreliable partner when it comes to mutual defence cooperation, the transatlantic alliance. So I don't think anything that happens here over these 2 days is going to change that fundamental fact that under Trump, no one really knows what the US is going to do when it comes to defence.
OK, Arthur, they're just gathering in the main hall, all of the leaders and their entourages. What is the format for the rest of the day? Are there going to be announcements?
Well, that's the interesting thing. So this meeting was originally supposed to be a 3-day meeting, which would have included several set-piece events. But because this is the widespread speculation largely confirmed in unofficial discussions with NATO members, because Trump walked out early from a G7 meeting, recently, I think it was last week, they decided to make it just one big event, one big meeting involving the heads of states. That's today. That's starting shortly. That's going to go on for about 3.5 hours. That's really where you will get the big decisions, where all the leaders are in place. And I think around in about 3.5 hours, there's going to be, you know, the end of that meeting and then a statement. And then we'll know what's been really agreed with regard to the defence spending pledges, and indeed if there is any sort of statement regarding US commitment to NATO. And then it all wraps up in the space of a few hours. There's obviously other sideline meetings involving foreign ministers and so on, but the big meeting is about to happen, and in a few hours' time we'll know what, if anything, of significance has been agreed or what statements will be made.
Arthur Sullivan from Deutsche Welle, thank you for your analysis. Thank you.